Hello, welcome to Devlog 5 on Enchantress development. Last week I talked about a fresh project and a clean start. So far I've got a fresh project which has got Wwise integrated, and I've added some programming in terms of movement and the camera. I'll go back into the programming in just a second, but for those of you that don't know what Wwise is, it's a third-party middleware piece of software that can be used to have interactive audio from a third party, hence the program of Wwise being integrated into the Unity game engine. I had problems with Wwise not being compatible, so I had to update the Wwise to my Unity, which is 2019.4.2 version that I'm currently running, and so it's compatible enough to generate the sound banks. Sound banks are basically all the classes of sound that you make in Wwise to sort of manage all your folders of audio, which is quite handy. Also, you can get an overview called Wwise Picker to have a look at all the current sounds that you've got in the game. This is all from my FMP, so it's just literally transferred over because I needed to use the same project license, because every time you open a new project in Wwise from Audio Connect, they want you to make a new project with a license, which obviously makes sense to not cause any issues. So what I've basically done is I moved everything over to let Wwise work, and sadly that did take up most of my time for the Friday, where I was obviously trying to get the motivation and get stuck into doing the actual programming. So I decided to take Friday a bit out, and then the past 2 days I've been working on the movement and the camera. I was following a tutorial from Brackies, obviously because he stopped YouTube videos now. His tutorials are definitely very good to watch and very handy, especially when it comes to first person movement and the use of the character controller. So the character controller is basically like having a rigid body physics but all in one, and it's just set in Unity. The function's already there for you. You just need to worry about obviously how your character's going to move and work out the calculations of gravity, speed, velocity, checking the ground and the distance to the ground. So what I've just done is a simple first person movement with moving left to right. You can press the spacebar for jumping, which is a new feature for my game, because in the last time I did my game I never had a jump feature because I thought I didn't really need it, but then I realised it's not got much flavour for my game and it's just like a intensified walking simulator. I want to add something a bit more. Considering my character's height is quite small as a child, I'm thinking I could add a few more mechanics. Actually, it was a good recommendation from a friend to add that, so I thought I might work on build onto that. So I mean, it can be removed in future if it doesn't work, but I'm hoping it will because it'll be a nice new feature. Feel free to check out my GDD that I've left in the description below as well, just to give an update of what my original plans for Enchantress were as well. A bit like the pitch video if you've ever seen it, but this is much more detailed game design document, basically what industry standards would use, just to help me obviously get my idea in what I wanted to make and how I was going to do it. So going into the character controller and player movement, it's got one script attached to a camera. So we've got the player, which has a cylinder for the shape as the mesh. At the moment it's just a capsule. It was called cylinder, but I've actually changed the mesh inside the component there. We've got the main camera, which is obviously what the player is going to be seeing out, hence the camera preview, and you've got just ground checks just to make sure that you're actually touching the floor. This is just a general plane that I'm using. But alongside with the camera, it's also got some code which has the player camera script. I'm not going to go into the script itself yet. I'm just going to demonstrate how the movement works. So if I press play, it should load up the whole scene. Just gonna wait for it. Here we go. Okay, so we've got player movement. We can move backwards, right, forwards and left. Simple WSD PC controls, and you've got jumping like so, which is smooth. You've got C for crouching, which also changes the speed. So with the speed of the character, it has a speed of 6 while walking, and then you have running as well, holding it left shift where you can run. And then when you go into crouch mode, sorry, I've just pressed the spacebar because that's my old controls, I need to get used to that. Pressing the C key, it'll be 3 in speed, so it'll be half. Now I do have this issue where if I press run at the same time while in crouching mode, I will end up running speed during crouching, which isn't possible because basically you're running like a fast crap, so that's not going to work. That will need to be amended anyway. But the main idea is that the controls are just there, so the foundations of movement are done. You've also got the ability to walk on top of objects, hence the velocity and the ground, so I can go upstairs eventually when they're implemented. I've also got my trusty camera zoom that I had originally in my game, which you press right click and you can zoom in. So if I go up to this object here, I can zoom in. This will eventually be developed into an examine system, which I did try to make in my first attempt of the game. Sadly, it wasn't actually a requirement that I needed, so I just scrapped it, but I did like the idea of doing it. Problem with an exam system is they're so complex and you'd have to do it from scratch, and there's a lot of Unity assets online, but I really want to try and sort of challenge myself to make it. I had a brief idea on how it would work with using a canvas renderer with a 3D object, but I'd have to look a bit more into it. I've looked at one article that may help, but it just depends on if it's compatible or not properly with my skill set. But that's what I'm doing Enchantress for, to improve my programming skills, and I just hope that will take me further in, you know, eventually making my own examine system. But enough of the actual play mode. So that's like the overall movement and the camera with space to jump, C to crouch, left alt to run, and then just zooming on the right click. So I'll go into the code. It may take a little while to load up because I've had Visual Studio sort of closed on and off today due to doing some work. Right, let's start off with player camera. Load that up. Okay, so here's Visual Studio open. It's 2019 I'm using, community version. I've got the camera script open, so I'll just go through it briefly and what all the functions are. So we've got, at the start, we're just using Unity directive library. We don't need to use any other ones. We've got basically mouse sensitivity set to 100F as a float function. We've got the camera smoothing for 4. We've got the normal camera mode, which just means without zooming, and then you've got the zoom camera mode, which is the value of 5 to make the enhanced zooming anyway, and also you've got the smoothness to add that at the bottom. Then we've got the player body, which interacts with the rotation of the camera. As you move the mouse around, the camera will go with it. And then you've got the zoom function here, where you input the right click and hold it down for the zooming to take place, and then the else input will undo those changes basically. So it's quite a simple camera mode where you've got a zooming function, and you've also got the locked mode for the cursor state when you're in this game mode on the start. Then we go over to player movements, which is a bit more detailed. I'm probably not going to go through the majority of it because it's still hard to grasp, and that's obviously just my skill set. I'd say my levels of programming are between beginner and intermediate, so I'm comfortable with probably programming in terms of setting up functions and writing variables and equalizing data and values. When it comes to like obviously UI, I can do that. I can show things, I can get things to appear and destroy. So basically just your general fundamentals really, which I'm hoping to improve on because I really want to get something to work that makes it feel like my own proper masterpiece in that respect, because you know this game's got a long road ahead if anything, but I hope it will get there with my improvement of programming. So we've got the character controller. Like I said, it's basically all in one first person body. It's aside from using physics, so like when you have the rigid body and a collider, it's got it all in one, so really all you've got to worry about is the values, hence the speed of the character, the gravity drop, so when you're from a height then the force that you have to go back down. You've got the jump height, which is I think reasonable for 1.5 for obviously my size of character. You've got the ground check to ensure that you're actually hitting the ground. You've got the distance between yourself and the ground. The layer mask helps as well, so that when you've got onto the ground, it's tagged ground. So it basically organises everything if you're going to add other functions. You've got the void update, basically just to checking the sphere below the character on the actual position and the distance between. You've got the player's movement with speed. This takes place more with the transform here. So you've got transform.right allowing you to go vertically, and then you've got transform forward allowing you to go horizontally. And then we've got moving on to gravity, and then you've got space for jumping. The gravity the gravity drops after your jump height has increased. And then you've got the crouching ability, so basically it makes sense in booleans how you do on off left, right. So is crouching is equal to not is crouching, so true is equal to false in that respect. I've tried to sort of manipulate that you can't run during crouch mode, but that's not happening at the moment, obviously, as I demonstrated. But you've also got the ability to use the crouch function, which is down below. Same goes for left shift for running. You know, is crouching false? I don't think you can crouch while running, so that's something that does work at least. I may have to double check that anyway. But then we go over to these separate functions. Everything is happening in update anyway. So void start is like the main starting point for the frame as the game's going on. You have got void awake, which is what happens just before. Literally when you press play, that's what happens with void awake, and you've got void start, and then update's just recursive. And then you've got run function as well, which has the if is running, you have the speed of 9, and then if you're not running, obviously you're walking, you've got back to the speed of 6. Hence with crouching it does the same, but with a twist, as you have height to think about. So you've got the height being lower when you're in crouch mode, and then when you're out of crouch mode in standing, you've got the same height than before. And you've also got a different speed in terms of 3 and 6, which I explained before. So that's basically what I've got as the principles of my movement, and I will continue to work on these scripts as I go along, because these are going to be like the main foundations of the player, and that's including adding a lantern, that's going to be adding menus, sound, anything you can think of, all evolving around the player. So that's basically where I'm at this week. I hope to get into more programming in the next couple of weeks and actually get things more working. I'm hoping to, like I say, get on with the examine system and some more interactables like object interaction, for example. I'm thinking with this scene I've got, I'm just going to do a whole test scene, and it would just be having like doors and drawers to open, and also start working with animations a bit more. I've got all the assets, so that's not the case. It's just more actually programming it fully to work, and especially one thing that will need to be done is inventory and AI, because they are two things I really struggled with. I ended up getting AI working to a degree where if the AI saw you, it would chase after you, but it wouldn't go into other rooms, and nothing really happened aside from attacking you. Obviously you didn't die or anything in the scenario, because I didn't make a die scene. I just literally had the AI attacking you, and then the AI will start going through the floor, so that was another issue that would need to be amended. But there is also the inventory, which I never had save data. I use something called OnGUI, which is basically like programming a user interface to appear. So say you've got command line, but you've also got user interface, which is what you're seeing right now. I was putting that in from some really good code online that helped, but I never had save data, and it was a bit dodgy, to be fair, to use, because it would only work and you'd have to edit everything in code instead of on an interface, which is obviously easier visually. So that's something I'll be changing by actually using the UI system in here. So I look forward to doing that in the next 2 weeks. I will not end up doing a video for next week because I'm taking part as well as hosting a game jam over the Easter weekend, so it'll take place from Good Friday until Easter Monday basically. So I'll be occupied doing that, but I will probably post a video about the game that I ended up making, even if it's broken and doesn't work, or if it's really small and I'm really happy with it and it does work. I look forward to the game jam because it's my first actual heavy game jam. Not really competition still, it's just pushing yourself to a challenge really, you know, 3 days to see what you can come up with and see if it works with all your skill set. But I look forward to it. It's definitely gonna add another good piece to portfolio, as it's always good to build up your game files. But I look forward to it, and we'll definitely put some more input into Enchantress within the next 2 weeks. So we're talking next weekend instead of the Easter one, because I'll be doing the game jam. So the next progress will end up being on the weekend of the 13th, which will be the 12th, 13th and 14th. I'll be doing Enchantress, and there'll be an updated video on the 15th of April where I'll show what I've been doing, hopefully a bit more, like I say, interaction, and what I'll end up seeing you then. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Feel free to check out my game online if you haven't already. Stay up to date with the blogs or any previous ones that have been. Also check out my other videos just to stay in the loop of what's been going on the past few months, and I hope to see you all in the near future. So thank you for watching, and see you soon.